Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, we have to start off in the near term because this map here from this is our all hazards weather map from weather.gov, shows we got quite a bit to deal with in the near term. One thing I think I underplayed in my video on Monday was what we see here. Now, we knew the cold air was coming in. We showed that. We knew that the winds were going to be fast, but this is just a great example of how it does not take much snow to give you blizzard conditions. And we've been seeing snowfall amounts here relatively light, but with wind speeds as fast as they are, we've got a wide sector with blizzard warning. So I'm recording right now in Tampa. I'm supposed to fly to Dallas and then Dallas to Sioux Falls tonight. We'll see if that flight actually happens. I hope that it does. It's a great group tomorrow I'm looking forward to speaking to, but it's a pretty rough go for it right now. Meanwhile, we got a pretty large sector of the country here under winter weather advisories, and that is because we're watching for some light snow to move across this area. Some locations may be picking up 2 to 5 inches of snow, but this is going to be the main threat area, I think, for the country in terms of precipitation. We need to get to an understanding of that really quickly here. Look at how strong these winds are, though, midday today on Wednesday. You can see a boundary sitting right in through here where the northerly winds on this side are just screaming here, and at times 30 to 40 miles an hour, gusting even higher. But you can also see where our severe weather threat is going to be today. If you just look down here inside of this area, we're transporting warm, moist, unstable air up, and the Storm Prediction Center is keeping a close eye on this quadrant here just to the east of the Mississippi River for our main severe weather threat. Well, the low pressure system and the snow is going to ride right in through here. There's a deformation zone in the mid levels of the atmosphere, and as it goes through, we are expecting to get, this is from the National Digital Forecast Database, you can see a pretty wide swath here of 2 to 4 inches of snow. Where we're really going to have a struggle with predicting the amounts is going to be right here in central Indiana and all along the southern edge of this boundary. Like so many of our other storm systems this year, it's been a difficult time seeing the models pick up properly on the conversion of the sleet and freezing rain getting mixed in with the snowfall forecasts. But the potential exists for some decently higher amounts, maybe above 5 inches, especially right north of the boundary here, where we'll go from rain and sleet and freezing rain over to snow. If we take a look at the probability from the European ensemble on picking up snow, you can see this is a probability of 6 inches. We're going to look right in through that quarter, and it starts there in east central Illinois and runs through central Indiana into Ohio. That little quadrant there needs to be on guard for the potential for accumulating more than what you just saw on the previous map. But as you can see, there's another swath coming right in through here on the back side, and we do have some more snow that is on tap. So very quickly, just want to show you the latest European model run before we get into the longer range here. The system as it emerges, if I just step you back and let you watch that again, you can see the tight pressure gradient throughout this afternoon and this evening right here out ahead of this big high pressure cell, and that's what's giving us the blizzard conditions in this area. That rain-snow boundary here through Thursday evening is going to be very challenging to forecast precipitation type along that. And you can see the heavy rain to the south of this. As it leaves Thursday morning, on the backside some light snow, and then some of the coldest air of the winter is going to sneak in here with this high pressure cell. But that high pressure cell is on the move. You can see it's already off to the east coast by the time we get into Sunday, and the atmosphere is reloading again next week, Monday into Tuesday, for another big system to come across the midsection of the country. So I'm kind of glossing over the details here because we're going to cover this again tomorrow, and I really want to focus on this pattern and when does it actually stop, okay? Now, if we just look out over the next 10 days from the operational models, we continue to see a few key pieces. One, the split flow in the Pacific is keeping California very dry. We do see that coming in, okay, so the jet stream's doing this, meeting up with the subtropical branch here. Our low pressure systems keep forming in this area and running on off to the north and east, and they're tapping into an abundant amount of Gulf moisture, which is why, in addition to what we've already seen, we are anticipating a lot more rain here in parts of the mid-south and the lower Mississippi River Valley. But snow coming through on this side with this next system that will be sliding through here. So this seems to be the pattern we are in, and are we going to break it? Because right now, that region right here has already seen, just in the last week, widespread swath of 6+ inches. There are some places that have seen much more than that, well over 10 to 12 inches of rainfall here in parts of Tennessee, northern Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, getting into the Appalachian Mountains of the Carolinas. Extremely, extremely wet conditions with the last few weeks, and you just saw that the pattern is not letting go anytime soon. So we just start to think longer term now. I want to think about spring, but I want to keep this in the context of the next couple of weeks. We still have quite a bit of water here in the snowpack that is in the headwaters of the Missouri and in the Mississippi River. So thinking about that and the melt of that, we're already increasing our spring flood threat just due to the snow water that's already there. Beneath the soil, we're still dealing with an excess here, as you can see, of 1 to 6 inches of excess soil moisture in this area. But it follows, the Missouri, the Mississippi, the Ohio, and especially down here in the Tennessee Valley, getting over into the southeast, extremely wet conditions. Now, I want to show you something because a lot of us are putting this in the context of a year ago. So this is February 10th, 2020. This is what the end of February looked like last year. So again, we can kind of rock back and forth. This was this year, and this is last year. There are some differences and there are some similarities. The similarities are that a lot of the Mississippi watershed, including all of the tributaries, still a year ago were saturated, as you can see here, and that's very true now. Some of the differences, though, have to deal with what's going on out west and also in Texas as well. So southern Texas having a much different start to their year as they did a year ago. So that's worth taking a look at here. Again, this is this year, and this was last year. But I do expect this map to continue to change in the near future. These are river gauges that are reporting flooding right now, and given the pattern I've just showed you, plus the snowmelt in this area, we're going to see a lot of spring flood fight on our major river systems in the midsection of the United States. Okay, if we get into the longer term, this is probably the most critical piece of this video. We've been forecasting now for about 2 weeks that we anticipated by the end of February, mid to end of February, we're going to see deep troughs establishing over Alaska and maintained over Greenland, with ridges pushing here in the Gulf of Alaska and one that's kind of set up here over the southeast. And therefore the flow pattern was going to do this quite a bit. All right. Now that's a more northerly track to the jet stream. This is an active North American track because the main jet stream troughs will keep swinging through this area. This is a pattern that keeps the Pacific Northwest wet and it keeps California very dry. And it just keeps producing systems that start here and race to the northeast. We're going to see that. We've been kind of preaching that for a while now, and we've been saying any shot at cold air is going to be relatively brief because it's got to be anchored to the cold air that's in Alaska. My question is, does this change for March? Does it change for March? Now, if we just look at what that pattern is going to give us over the next 15 days, we can see the effect of the split. Look how dry it is from this part of the Pacific all the way over to the west coast, but wet in the Pacific Northwest, coming into the Rockies. The subtropical branch sneaks in, and we just get these troughs that form like this and just race on off, meaning this whole area looking wetter than average for the next 15 days, getting us almost all the way through the end of February. Okay. Temperature-wise, like I said, any chance at cold air is going to be relatively brief. You see here, these are the temperature anomalies for tomorrow on Thursday. We're going to be, 30 degrees colder than average in parts of Iowa, South Dakota, and parts of Minnesota. But watch what happens as you go from Thursday into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You see the pattern is just on this wave. Behind every system, there's a brief shot at cold air, but the warmth rebounds very quickly, which is why when you look at what it does to our next 5 days, yeah, we got the cold shot that comes in, right? But days 5 through 10, as the pattern reloads, well, the warmth builds back in here, and the real storehouse of real sustained cold is in Alaska. And so this is what we have to look at. Whenever we get a lot of cold air tucked away in Alaska, our concern always becomes, can we unlock that and let it slide down here or through the Canadian prairies or over toward the east? And will any shot at cold air be long duration or will it be brief? Because we think about Alaska as a storehouse for this cold air. So let's see what the models say first, and then we're going to get into a better analysis of that. This is the new European weeklies. The last 4 runs have looked very similar to this. This takes us all the way out to March 20th. So this is February 20th to March 20th. We still see a lot of the same thing, the deeper troughs, the big lows coming up into Alaska, and pattern kind of letting occasional troughs come down through here and take off systems in this area. So it's saying, well, it's drier than average here in the central states, but that doesn't mean it won't get any snow. It's been suggesting that the cold coldest air stays tucked away in the western United States, and the east continues on its warm trend, primarily because the European model is not letting go of that positive North Atlantic oscillation. But we have other models, and the CFSV2 wants to dump that cold air down all the way across the eastern half of North America as we get into the month of March and completely toss out the pattern here as suggested by the European. So I've got to ask myself the question, what's the probability of that? Because this would be the pattern we'd be changing. If that occurs, this would slow down what's happening here in the Pacific Northwest and what's happening down here over the southeast, where we have over the year to date seen incredibly excessive precipitation. This would be favorable if there is a breakdown for parts of California, and we would get rid of this. In other words, that cold air would finally push in this direction, but it's going to take a big change over Alaska, and over Greenland in order for that to happen. So I got asked a great question, and that question was, is there any correlation month to month on temperatures? Now, the question came from somebody in the eastern half of the country, so I'm going to address the eastern half of the country because we have seen, as you notice here, very, very warm conditions for the last 45 days in that area. And the answer to that is yes, but a resounding no. So you see here's our crosshairs on temperature anomalies. So we basically got the correlation of February versus March temperatures in the east. And the correlation coefficient is 0.13. And that is very, very weakly correlated, as you can see here. So all that tells us is what we're having in one month doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have it in the next month. So we have to ask ourselves, what could be changing? I certainly don't see any change in the stratospheric polar vortex and the Arctic oscillations response. You see, over the next 15 days, the AO is staying very positive as the polar vortex stays very tightly wound sitting over the Arctic. We would need to see this start to collapse down here for any sort of long-term systematic change to the pattern, at least as it relates to the Arctic and what's above it in the stratosphere. Plus, right now, the strength of the polar vortex is sitting here, almost at the highest end of our spectrum. And we're running out of time in order for a polar vortex disruption to give us any sort of sustained cold. So we come back to our idea again about what's happening here and here. The troughing that's happening over Greenland and Alaska and the ridge that's in the Gulf of Alaska. And we want to know, is there any change? Well, the North Atlantic, well, we look at the North Atlantic oscillation and it stays positive. It has spent so much of this winter in positive territory. We'd have to unlock that big Greenland trough, letting the NAO go down here before I could tell you that we'd get sustained cold air in the eastern half of the country. But then I asked myself this question. Okay, we keep preaching about all the cold air that's in Alaska, and it just can't sit there forever. The big question is, when we have cold air in February in Alaska, is there anything we could tell about what March may look like based on that one thing? And the answer to that, when I did the analysis, was yes. We actually saw a pretty robust signal when I found the top 10 coldest Alaskas in the near-term record and looked at what happened the following March. So this was February in Alaska versus March around the rest of the country. We actually saw colder air pushing in through here. So that meant that that cold air did kind of come out of that area. But the years when that happened, we did not have the North Atlantic locked up into cold like we do now. And those years, we also had negative PDO and negative INSO. And what does that mean? That meant that those years we saw really, really cold water here and really hot water there. Well, the map you're looking at right now doesn't have that. It also showed very cold water in this area, and we still don't have that either. And there was a change here in the pattern. So what I'm trying to say is that while the storehouse of cold in Alaska could be unleashed into March, as we get into that time period for the eastern half of the country and make things quite exciting for the eastern half of the country, it is just one of many factors we're kind of adding up here. So let that be kind of that part of the analysis. Since we're in the tropics, I want to let you know something. The tropics seem to be repeating their behavior. The Hofmüller diagram on the right kind of illustrates that. These westerly wind bursts that we've seen throughout January seem to want to continue into the end of February. And we have the easterly wind on this side. We've seen this pattern repeat itself. Yet there's no strong signal coming from the tropics. For example, the Southern Oscillation Index, well, we've seen it rise up above zero and then kind of come back down and hover around zero. That essentially just tells me that the atmosphere is not fully converted over to either El Nino or La Nina. We've certainly seen that in the ocean temperatures. So if I had to say something that might help this along, well, we need to see this out of the tropics. Since El Nino, La Nina is off the table, we need to get the MJO out of phase 5 and 6 and get it to sweep over here somewhere to phase 1, 2, and 3. So we need to watch out for that as we get into March. If that happens, that at least tells me the tropics might be playing around a little bit with this idea of March getting some colder air in the eastern half of the country. But also remember, March is a time period where we're usually gaining quite a bit of heat as sun duration increases. One other big change to think about is over the last 15 to 20 days, we've seen the global winds really accelerate, and now they've kind of calmed back down back toward normal. Now, if they really dip south here with time, not south, excuse me, but below that dashed line, we could get ourselves into a much more highly amplified and blocked pattern. I'm not seeing that right now. I'm just telling you, if March is going to be a major change, which the European says it isn't, but other sources are saying it is, these are the things that have to happen. So we come back to the same idea. Watch Alaska, watch Greenland. They will be the bellwether of change in our forecast pattern as we move forward. One thing I can say with some certainty, though, is where we've already seen quite a lot of activity in terms of severe weather. Climatologically, March really begins the ramp up from Texas all the way over to the Carolinas with severe weather. So we're most certainly in a time period of increased activity with severe weather. And that's also an area that so far, looking at the National Phenology Network's leaf index anomalies, we've already seen very warm conditions so far this year. Had it not been so very wet in this area, we would have seen very rapid planting progress here right now. So those are the main things I'm watching. We need to watch them with me as we watch these things evolve, and I look forward to talking again very soon. Thank you for your time today.